The night sky above the Gulf of Oman looked deceptively calm, a velvet black sheet scattered with stars that shimmered like distant surveillance satellites, watching silently as the world's covert wars unfolded far below. The ocean, steady and indifferent, carried with it the whispers of nations, the secrets of smugglers, the clipped radio calls of patrol vessels, and the steady hum of a cargo ship that seemed no different from the dozens drifting along the maritime arteries of the Middle East. But this rust-patched hulking vessel registered under a shell company in Liberia, carried more than steel containers. Deep inside its hold was a classified Iranian missile component, a prototype guidance system that could tip the regional balance if it reached its final destination. The deal, engineered through a dark chain of intermediaries and deniable financiers, was never supposed to be traced. Yet Mossad had been listening long before the ship left its shadowed port. It began, as many operations did, with a fragment of information, a stray message, overlooked by others but flagged instantly by a Mossad signals analyst during a sleepless night shift inside a windowless room in Tel Aviv. An encrypted burst stuck out in the data swarm, not for what it said, but for how it deviated from a known pattern associated with an Iranian procurement officer known only as the broker. His digital footprint was notoriously ghost-like, shifting through VPN chains and dark market shells, his activity indistinguishable from the millions of meaningless packets streaming across global networks. But that night, his signal touched a forbidden frequency inside a private maritime logistics channel. A single ping. A single deviation. Enough for Mossad to pull the thread. By morning, the fragment had multiplied into a mosaic of suspicions, each one pieced together by analysts who specialized in hearing secrets between the lines. A procurement front in Tehran had quietly increased overseas banking activity. A ship broker in Muscat registered a vessel under an alias that mirrored a company dissolved 6 years prior. A cargo manifest from Bandar Abbas listed industrial machinery components, but the codes were mismatched, as if someone had manually altered the file in a hurry. It was the kind of sloppy error that only appeared when someone believed no one was watching. And they were wrong. Inside the headquarters, the Mossad task force assembled in a steel-walled briefing room, the kind used only for operations where nothing could leak, not even the oxygen levels. Senior Officer Yao Rahamim stood at the front, her posture sharp, her voice devoid of theatrics. She revealed the emerging contours of the missile deal like a surgeon exposing an infection. A prototype missile guidance system, believed to be in development by an Iranian research unit operating far from official oversight, had been smuggled toward an intermediary state. From there, it would be replicated and mass-produced, slipping through the cracks of international restrictions. If completed, it would give Tehran's proxies an unprecedented targeting capability, fast, precise, nearly unstoppable. The analysts already knew what that meant. One missile with advanced guidance could redirect the future of a war. It could alter border calculations. It could cost civilian lives. It was not a component Israel could allow to vanish into the world's murky trading networks. Mossad wouldn't wait for intelligence to harden. They would act while the trail was fresh, while the cargo ship, known now by its cover name, the Blue Vantage, was still in international waters. The farther it drifted, the more likely the component would disappear into a port governed by corruption and deniability. Time wasn't just short, it was evaporating. And so the operation was greenlit. In the days that followed, Mossad field units moved like silhouettes across continents. Undercover officers traveled through Oman, the UAE, and Sri Lanka, blending seamlessly among oil executives, tourists, shipping inspectors, and night shift workers. In Dubai, an operative with a Belgian passport infiltrated a maritime law firm suspected of processing the ship's forged ownership papers. He never asked direct questions. Questions alarm people. Instead, he casually borrowed a desk, scanned an unattended folder while sipping machine coffee, memorized a sequence of numbers and left. The firm never knew it had been breached. A second operative, disguised as a logistics risk assessor for a European insurer, boarded a different cargo ship docked in Colombo. She spoke with sailors, bribed a port worker for an unrelated shipment record, and gathered enough background chatter to identify a pattern of ships used in covert Iranian deals. Among them was the Blue Vantage, already at sea, its course carefully inconsistent, a sign of a captain instructed to avoid predictable marine lanes. The challenge wasn't locating the ship. Mossad could track that. The challenge was maneuvering close enough to intervene without triggering a diplomatic firestorm. If Israel were caught conducting an operation in international waters involving Iranian material, the headlines would spiral into dangerous territory, accusations, furious speeches at the UN, retaliatory threats. but failure wasn't an option. The planning team in Tel Aviv broke into groups, each responsible for a different slice of the operation: maritime tracking, communication disruption, false flag camouflage, extraction, post-operation media shaping, and deniable assets. This was the kind of mission that required precision not only to strike, but to disappear afterward. One team worked through the night to simulate the ship's exact layout, using old schematics from similar vessels, combined with satellite scans and images scraped from shipping databases. They reconstructed narrow corridors, rusted stairwells, container stacks, pressure locks, and the likely location of the concealed missile component. The ship's crew manifest was forged, but Mossad analysts compared the names to facial recognition hits pulled from Gulf ports. One crewman had previously worked on a vessel used for smuggling fuel to Yemen. Another had been detained in Karachi for helping offload sensitive cargo. None of them were ideologues, they were opportunists, meaning unpredictable. But the true concern was the Iranian handler believed to be on board, a mid-level intelligence liaison posing as a cargo quality inspector. Mossad didn't know his real name, but they had a code name, Farid. He was known for two things: never traveling without a concealed kill-switch device for sensitive equipment, and never hesitating to use violence when a shipment was threatened. If cornered, he would likely destroy the guidance component before letting it fall into foreign hands. Stopping him wasn't optional. It was required. The operational commander, a veteran Mossad field officer named Daniel Barak, watched the digital map of the ship's trajectory as if it were a live enemy. He'd led operations in Africa, Europe, and South America, but maritime missions were different. At sea, escape remained uncertain. There were no crowds to disappear into, no alleys to vanish through, no safe houses where a burned operative could hide until exfiltration. Success depended on precision, timing, and misdirection measured down to the minute. The plan evolved over 72 hours. Mossad would use a covert insertion team posing as a civilian emergency crew responding to a fabricated distress signal. A radio burst, simulated perfectly through a captured Iranian transmitter, would convince the Blue Vantage that a nearby vessel was suffering engine failure. The ship would slow to assess the situation. That moment of hesitation was all Mossad needed. Two Zodiac boats, silent and camouflaged, would approach at night under radar cover. The operatives would board through the aft maintenance ladder. Once inside, they would extract the missile component, neutralize Farid if necessary, secure digital evidence, and vanish before dawn. If you enjoy these secret operation stories, hit the like button, because the next moments would define a mission few would ever know existed. Inside the Mossad safe house in Muscat, the insertion team prepared. Each operative stripped their gear down to the essentials: magnetic silencers, lock bypass tools, ocean weather tactical suits, compact encrypted radios, and sterile medical kits. Every serial number had been filed off, every traceable material removed. Nothing they carried could betray Israel's involvement. They reviewed the ship's internal layout until each turn, each hatch, each blind spot became a mental photograph. They rehearsed silent takedowns on a mock corridor built from metal scaffolding. They memorized the faces of the crew. They learned the emergency codes for a dozen different nations' maritime authorities, just in case the cover needed to shift mid-operation. On the fourth night, as the winds shifted and the moon retreated behind thick clouds, the team deployed. The ocean swallowed their Zodiac boats as if embracing ghosts. Salt spray stung their faces. The hum of their engines was barely audible, tuned to frequencies that blended with ambient ocean noise. From afar, the ships were invisible, just dark shapes hugging the waves. The Mossad command center tracked them via encrypted bursts, each one lasting no longer than half a second to avoid triangulation. The Blue Vantage loomed ahead, a floating giant illuminated only by the occasional deck light flickering over its rusted railing. Its silhouette was imposing, a black mass drifting like a predator without prey. The operatives cut their engines and drifted close enough to hear the vibrations of the cargo ship's hull. Timing was everything now. The forged distress signal went through. Suddenly, the cargo ship's radio crackled. The captain responded. The ship began to slow. That deceleration, just a few knots, created the narrow window the Mossad team had engineered after days of planning. The operatives exchanged glances. It was time. They approached the rear ladder, the steel slick with salt. One by one, they climbed like shadows materializing from the sea, each movement silent and controlled. They reached the maintenance deck, where only a single fatigued crew member was on patrol. His expression shifted too late from boredom to alarm. A gloved hand covered his mouth. A precise strike dropped him silently. The operatives dragged him behind a container stack. They were aboard. The operation had begun. Inside the dim corridors of the cargo ship, the metal walls groaned with the slow sway of the sea, carrying echoes that could easily mask the soft footfalls of the Mossad operatives. The air smelled of diesel, salt, and the faint metallic sting of rust. Every corner presented the possibility of discovery, every shadow a potential witness. But the team moved with the discipline of men and women who had trained their bodies to obey silence like a language. Their breaths were controlled, shallow. Their eyes adjusted quickly, mapping darkness into geometry. The ship's schematics lived in their minds. 2 decks above, the concealed Iranian guidance system sat sealed inside a freight container disguised among scrap machinery. Farid, if he was on board, would likely be near the cargo bay or the communications room. He was the wild card. The component they could steal, replace, or sabotage. But Farid could ruin everything with a single decision, and Mossad couldn't afford a failure that would echo through the region's future. They moved deeper, past mesh gates and humming generators. Daniel Barak signaled with 2 fingers. They split into 2 elements. One team began descending toward the engine room where interference equipment might be hidden. The second, led by Daniel, climbed upward toward the cargo stacks. The ocean thudded against the hull, rhythmic but tense, like the heartbeat of an enemy listening from the other side. A sudden clang cut through the corridor. The operatives froze. A door slammed somewhere ahead, followed by a man muttering in Farsi accented with exhaustion. Footsteps. Daniel motioned everyone back into a narrow recess beside a water pipe. The crewman shuffled toward them, rubbing his eyes, half asleep. He passed so close Daniel could smell the stale tobacco on his breath. One misstep and the mission would spiral into chaos. But the man kept walking. 2 minutes later, the corridor fell silent again. The team exhaled at last, not relief, just acknowledgement that the knife's edge hadn't cut them yet. If you're enjoying this covert operation unfolding in real time, hit the like button. Because from here, everything accelerated. Down in the engine room, the secondary Mossad team located a small device concealed behind a rusted panel, a signal amplifier. Iranian ships often used these to boost short-range encrypted communications without drawing satellite attention. Destroying it wasn't enough. It had to be swapped with a Mossad replica capable of feeding disinformation. Working under red-filtered lights, the team removed the panel silently, rewired the amplifier, and replaced it with the replica. Now any signal sent from the ship would route through Mossad's filters first. The operation gained a new layer of control. Meanwhile, Daniel's team arrived at the cargo bay, its vast interior lit intermittently by industrial lamps that flickered like dying stars. Towering stacks of containers rose around them, metal giants that turned the space into a labyrinth. The soundscape changed here, creaking steel, distant machinery, a faint hum beneath the deck. Daniel scanned with his thermal device. Nothing human within 30 meters. But thermal wasn't always reliable on ships. Hot machinery created ghosts. They climbed a stack, found the container with the mismatched serial number, the one Mossad had flagged from the falsified manifest. The lock was sealed with a plate that looked standard but wasn't. It was a magnetic deadbolt disguised as a shipping latch. Iranian intelligence loved these tricks. But Mossad loved them more. Using a custom field tool, Daniel bypassed the magnetic seal with 3 taps and a single twist. It clicked open. He slid the heavy door just enough for an operative to slip inside. The smell of grease and machinery wafted out, but beneath it was something colder, sterile, manufactured in a lab, not a factory. Inside, the guidance system sat inside a reinforced case. Ugly, unmarked. The kind of object nations denied owning even when photographed. The team photographed every angle, every serial plate, every seam. Documentation mattered. Intelligence wasn't just about crushing threats, it was about proving they existed. But then the lights flickered. A faint alarm beeped somewhere overhead. 4 operatives froze simultaneously. Daniel's jaw tightened. Someone had accessed the communications room. Someone knew something was wrong. For a moment, the cargo ship seemed to hold its breath. The noises shifted, the mechanical hum felt sharper. Daniel signaled the team to secure the device. They prepared the extraction, a decoy case identical to the real one, filled with inert components. If the Iranians discovered anything later, they would assume the shipment had failed due to a logistic error or internal betrayal, not an external operation. Mossad operations were designed to leave ghosts, not accusations. Then came the sound they had dreaded, boots running on metal stairs, urgent, coordinated. Flashlights. Angry voices in Farsi. Farid wasn't alone. The captain must have gotten suspicious. Maybe he noticed the distress signal was off frequency. Maybe the sleeping crewman sensed something wrong and radioed quietly. Mossad always planned for contingencies, but improvisation separated the living from the dead. Daniel motioned for the team to retreat deeper into the cargo stacks. They navigated through narrow gaps between containers, invisible to anyone except someone with tactical training. Farid's men reached the bay below. Their flashlights sliced through the darkness like knives. They spread out, scanning for intruders. One of them shouted as he noticed the container latch was slightly ajar. 3 men rushed forward. Daniel whispered into his mic, "Plan C." The operatives reached the service duct hidden behind a tower of containers. It wasn't designed for humans, but Mossad didn't need comfort, just passage. They crawled inside, dragging the sealed guidance system case behind them. Sweat gathered on their foreheads. The metal scraped their elbows. Farid's men climbed the container stacks, searching. One of them fired a warning shot into the air. The bullet punched into a steel wall inches from Daniel's head. Outside the duct, Farid's voice boomed with authority. He spoke calmly, too calmly. "Search everything. Someone is on board." He wasn't guessing. He knew. The Mossad team moved faster. The duct angled down toward a maintenance hatch. They pushed through, emerging into a dim corridor far from the search. But the ship was waking up. Doors slammed. Radios buzzed. Boots thundered overhead. Daniel whispered, "Extraction now. Move." On the upper deck, the second Mossad team had already prepared the exfil route. The ocean wind whipped across the ship. Dark clouds smothered the moon, giving them ideal cover. But the cargo ship's crew had begun locking down external access points. Alarms echoed faintly across the deck. Crewmen spilled out with flashlights and makeshift weapons. The team sprinted across the deck, keeping low, navigating around containers. They reached the aft section just as Daniel's group emerged from below. The reunion was brief. No words. Just a nod. A shout erupted behind them. Farid stood at the opposite end of the deck, his silhouette framed by a harsh floodlight. He raised a pistol and fired. A bullet sparked against a railing. Another zipped past Daniel's shoulder. Farid barked orders in Farsi, and half a dozen crew members surged forward. The Mossad team dove behind a container. Daniel peered out. Farid was advancing, methodical, confident. He held a small device in his left hand, a kill switch. If he triggered it, the missile guidance system could detonate or be corrupted beyond recovery. Lives weren't the only thing at stake. Years of intelligence about Iran's shadow weapons programs could vanish with one press. Daniel couldn't let Farid get close. He motioned to an operative carrying a compact dazzler. The operative popped up, aimed at the floodlight, and fired. A burst of blinding light erupted, plunging the deck into chaotic shadow. Shouts erupted. Men stumbled. Farid cursed and shielded his eyes. The team sprinted for the aft ladder. But Farid was relentless. Even half-blinded, he fired wildly, bullets ringing against steel. A shot grazed the railing inches from Daniel's leg. The Mossad operatives reached the ladder and descended fast, the ocean wind assaulting them as they climbed down toward the extraction point. The Zodiacs drifted below, engines silent, operatives inside ready to pull them off the ship. One by one they descended. But Farid reached the railing above. He leaned out, aiming down at them. Daniel turned, hanging by one arm on the ladder. He raised his suppressed pistol and fired 3 shots into the floodlight above Farid. Glass exploded. Darkness swallowed them all. Farid stumbled back, dazed. Daniel dropped the last few meters into the waiting boat. The team pulled him in, and the Zodiac peeled away instantly, cutting through waves like a shark breaking pursuit. The second Zodiac followed. Above them, crewmen spilled onto the aft deck, shouting, firing into the darkness. Bullets hit the water, sending up geysers of spray. The Mossad boats zigzagged through the waves, staying low, using the ship's shadow as cover until they vanished into the night sea. Behind them, Farid watched helplessly as the Zodiacs disappeared. He clutched the kill switch device, but it was useless now. The real guidance system was gone. And in the distant darkness, Mossad had already begun erasing every trace of themselves. The ocean swallowed their presence, turning espionage back into myth. And the mission was far from over. The night closed behind the Mossad Zodiacs like a curtain swallowing the final act of a play no audience would ever admit existed. The operatives crouched low, gripping the sides as the boats sliced through the water, their wakes dissolving into darkness before the searchlights aboard the Blue Vantage could even sweep the area. The adrenaline faded slowly, replaced by the cold bite of ocean wind and the heavier weight of what they carried. Not just a stolen Iranian missile guidance system, but a future redirected, a threat cut short before the world even knew it had been born. They raced toward the extraction vessel, a disguised fishing trawler bristling on the inside with covert communication equipment. The trawler's lights were dimmed, its engine tuned to sound like a vessel far older than it truly was. A perfect ghost of the sea. As the Zodiacs approached, a rope ladder unfurled over the side, and one by one the operatives boarded, lifting the sealed case carefully onto the deck as if it were nitroglycerin. Inside the cramped operations cabin, Daniel and his team set the case on a reinforced table. Water dripped from their gear, forming puddles beneath their boots as the trawler sped away from the cargo ship's vector. A Mossad tech specialist, quiet, meticulous and wearing gloves finer than those used in laboratories, opened the case with a sterilized tool. The lid clicked and lifted, revealing the device that had triggered a multinational covert scramble. It was compact, almost elegant in its design. A core of advanced processors, inertial sensors, microstabilizers and alloy composites unlike anything produced legally under arms restrictions. Iranian engineers, funded through black channels and supervised by clandestine military units, had created this quietly, outside the eyes of any international inspectors. This was the tip of a spear they hoped one day to unleash. And Mossad had just extracted it from under their noses. "It's intact," the tech specialist whispered. "Perfect condition." Daniel nodded. But his expression didn't match the triumph in the room. His mind remained on Farid, the Iranian handler, still aboard the Blue Vantage. A man like that wouldn't rest. He would scramble to explain what happened. He would lie, manipulate, alter logs, blame subordinates, fabricate sabotage. But at some point Tehran would learn the truth, that their secret missile component was gone. That an enemy they couldn't see had reached into their shadows and stolen their future. And they would react. Every operation had ripples, and sometimes the ripples hit shores that were never meant to be touched. The trawler headed toward a pre-planned rendezvous point far from commercial routes. A private vessel, unremarkable to the naked eye but loaded with classified Israeli tech, waited to take the device the rest of the way. Until then, silence was both their shield and their companion. The operatives changed into dry clothing, checked their equipment, and replayed the operation in their minds like investigators searching for cracks. Mossad encouraged operatives to be their own harshest critics. The sea gave them time to dissect every second. An hour later, Daniel stepped outside onto the deck. The sky remained overcast, the ocean shifting like liquid obsidian. In the distance, faint lights from container ships dotted the horizon like drifting constellations. None of them knew that a high-stakes game had just unfolded nearby. None would know how close the world had come to a new generation of precision weapons in the wrong hands. Daniel inhaled deeply. The wind smelled of salt, iron, and the subtle satisfaction of a mission accomplished without glory. Then the deckhand approached. "We intercepted something," he said quietly. "You should hear this." Inside the operations cabin, a Mossad signals officer replayed the transmission. Static crackled, then Farid's voice pierced through with desperate clarity. "Lost control of the cargo, sabotage suspected, no survivors among inspection crew, request immediate retrieval, possible hostile presence." He was lying already, weaving a narrative to protect himself. Standard tradecraft. But the tone beneath his words was unmistakable: fear. He was afraid of what Tehran would do to him. Afraid of losing the only shield that had kept him alive through years of covert procurement. Afraid of rumors that Mossad operatives didn't just steal intelligence, they erased obstacles. In Farid's world, fear was currency, and he had just gambled everything. Daniel listened calmly. The transmission told him more than Farid intended. The Iranian handler had not triggered the kill switch because he didn't have time, or because the Mossad dazzler had disrupted his vision at the critical moment. Either way, the guidance system was preserved. But Farid's request for immediate retrieval meant a retrieval vessel or aircraft might soon be sent to track the cargo ship. That complicated things. If Iran launched a search and discovered evidence of boarding, disturbed locks, missing items, camera blind spots, they might deduce the truth. And if they deduced the truth, this covert operation could escalate into diplomatic fire. The Mossad signals officer muted the transmission. The room went silent again. Daniel thought for a moment. "We have the device," he said. "That's what matters. Farid's lies will buy us time. But we're not done. Because Mossad never ended a mission simply by leaving the scene. The next phase was containment. The trawler continued west, toward a rendezvous point near a reef where the sea grew shallow enough to deter larger vessels. There, an Israeli covert operations ship, a research vessel by appearance, waited. The handoff was smooth. The guidance system was transferred into a shockproof crate, sealed, encrypted, and handed to 2 intelligence couriers. They would take it to a secure facility for deconstruction and analysis. Iran's secret weapon would become Israel's secret understanding. When the courier vessel disappeared beyond the horizon, the Mossad operatives on the trawler turned their attention to the cleanup phase. They altered maritime logs, inserted false meteorological interference reports, and created digital noise to confuse any satellite reconstruction attempts. Mossad understood that the world's intelligence agencies, friendly and hostile, looked for anomalies. Any operation left footprints unless those footprints were meticulously replaced with new ones. Farid's search team interrogated the crew of the Blue Vantage, looking for answers they would never find. Some sailors claimed they saw shadows on the deck. Others claimed nothing happened at all. The captain blamed faulty equipment. The Iranian intelligence branch inquired about pirates, sabotage, bad weather, electromagnetic interference, and internal betrayal. In the end, they would settle on the explanation that caused them the least embarrassment. It was easier to blame incompetence than admit Mossad had slipped inside an Iranian covert missile deal and stolen the prize. But Mossad wasn't celebrating. Not yet. 2 days later, reports surfaced from intelligence intercepts. Farid had been detained by Iranian internal security. He tried to defend himself, citing his men's witness accounts, citing impossible shadows that moved like phantoms. His claims of boarding went ignored. The Iranians viewed him not as a survivor but as a liability. Mossad had not needed to eliminate him. His own masters would finish that task. In Tel Aviv, deep inside a secure facility where cell phones were forbidden and even the walls were layered with anti-surveillance materials, the guidance system was dismantled. Mossad engineers and analysts cataloged each component. They learned that Iran had made surprising strides. The device was more advanced than anticipated, using materials sourced through a labyrinth of black market routes stretching from Eastern Europe to Southeast Asia. Identifying these routes would allow Mossad to target the supply chain, another victory hidden inside the first. While analysts worked, senior Mossad leadership met to review the entire operation. Each phase was dissected: intelligence discovery, field deployment, maritime infiltration, device extraction, exfiltration, and cleanup. Mossad treated each operation as a living organism, always evolving, always teaching. The success of the mission was undeniable. A missile deal crushed mid-sea. A prototype seized. An Iranian handler neutralized indirectly. A shadow war won without public acknowledgement. But the regional implications were even more significant. Without the new guidance technology, Iran's missile upgrade program had been set back months, perhaps years. Proxy groups reliant on such weapons would be deprived of precision capabilities. Israel had bought itself time measured not in days but in geopolitical breathing space. And yet, victories of this nature always carried weight. Daniel sat alone on a balcony at the Mossad compound, watching the golden sunrise spill across Tel Aviv. The city was waking up to a day like any other. People drove to work. Cafes opened their doors. Joggers passed along the waterfront. No one knew that a select group of operatives had hung from a ladder over the raging sea, under fire, stealing a device that could have changed everything. No one knew how close the region had come to a new, deadlier chapter. That was the paradox of Mossad's work. Triumph without applause. Sacrifice without recognition. Success measured not in medals but in silence. As Daniel watched the sun reflect off the glass towers, he thought of the ocean's darkness, of Farid's shadow at the railing, of bullets slicing through the night air. It all felt distant now, muted by the calm daylight. But he knew the quiet would be temporary. Somewhere, in some hidden lab or secret port, another operation was already beginning to take shape. Another threat would emerge. Another decision would be made in a room without windows. Mossad lived in those spaces, the shadows between wars, the whispers between nations. And for now, at least for a moment, they had tilted the balance in Israel's favor again. The ocean would keep its secrets. The ship would continue its journey, with its crew spinning stories to escape punishment. Iran would investigate, blame, and purge. And Mossad would file this operation away, not as a victory but as a reminder. A reminder that even in the darkest nights, on the most remote seas, in the heart of the world's covert battlegrounds, there was nowhere a hidden threat could truly hide. The intelligence war never ended. It simply shifted locations. And somewhere, in a secure vault beneath Tel Aviv, the stolen missile guidance system waited silently, a trophy of a battle fought in shadows, a warning to those who believed the sea or the night could protect them from the long, precise reach of Mossad.